Piers Morgan didn't walk into that interview like a man guessing. He walked in like someone holding a grenade, smiling calmly before pulling the pin. The smirk said everything. He knew something dangerous. And when he finally said it out loud, the explosion was instant. 57,000 complaints flooding ITV. Not whispers, not outrage from a fringe group, a tidal wave. All because he dared to say what millions had already been saying quietly behind screens and closed doors. And here's the part that makes your stomach tighten. Meghan Markle didn't respond publicly, she didn't debate him, she didn't clarify, she went straight behind the curtain, straight to the bosses. Pressure applied quietly, privately, surgically. Not through PR statements, not through lawyers on record, just direct force. And Piers didn't even know until his career at ITV was already over. Sit with that for a second.
She was never pregnant at all. Instead, the videos emboldened conspiracy theorists. They're calling it Megspiracy, and the pair are being subjected to yet more merciless ridicule. Another lie. And by the way, Meghan, if you don't like me calling you a liar, just sue me, and we'll go through all this in court. For Harry and Meghan, it's more a case of never reign and never abstain, especially when it comes to nauseating self-publicity, which invariably backfires. Sometimes, I don't know, words seem superfluous, really. Meghan shared that bedside twerking video, taken shortly, apparently, before she gave birth to Lilibet. Remember the child that she named after the Queen's private nickname that was given to by Duke of Edinburgh, without getting permission from the Queen.
Your opinion is irrelevant, because I'm a baby mama, I can do just what I want to turn up.
In the end, I was required to apologise for disbelieving Meghan Markle.
In this case, about whether you think the birth was real, whether you think there was a surrogate, whether you think Meghan was wearing a moon bump, the fact is, Harry and Meghan lied. Buckingham Palace lied on their behalf. There was a complete cover-up over the birth of Prince Archie.
Harry and Meghan, ongoing debate, their war with the royal family, war against the monarchy, their specific, constant referencing to the fact that they believe they were driven out of here because of racism in Britain. Meghan wrote private letters to King Charles naming two royals who she accuses of taking part in those supposedly troubling conversations about Archie's skin colour. I was rejected by Meghan Markle. It's so utterly ridiculous. And yet people like you promote these scurrilous rumours.
But there's got to be a reason that you're so angry
at your heart, no, I'm not angry with it. Here's my thing with it. I'm angry at their hypocrisy. I'm very angry about the ongoing attacks and diminishing of the reputation of the royal family and the monarchy.
That's the moment the fairy tale cracked. A woman who preaches about free speech, empowerment, and standing up to bullies was allegedly trying to silence a journalist because he refused to believe her version of events. The irony wasn't subtle, it was brutal. And when Piers later said, with that barely hidden grin, that he was still completely uncancelled, it landed hard. Because truth doesn't disappear just because someone demands silence. And Piers made it very clear, he has receipts. And what shook him most wasn't anger, it was desperation. According to him, this wasn't about hurt feelings. This was calculated, cold, career-ending intent. All because he wouldn't play along with a perfectly scripted story. And here's where things stop being uncomfortable and start being disturbing. Every question he raised is still unanswered. Every inconsistency still floating in the air. No explanations, no timelines clarified. When someone works this hard to shut people up instead of proving them wrong, it forces the ugliest question of all. What are they hiding?
Meghan filed a formal complaint with ITV, a British station, over Piers Morgan's comments about her. That was before Morgan's sudden exit as host of Good Morning Britain.
Because what Piers laid out wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was a pattern. And even people who once defended Meghan without hesitation started to pause. Then came the pregnancy bump. And this is where the story takes a turn so strange it made even loyal supporters uneasy. The comparison was impossible to ignore. Catherine stood outside the hospital hours after giving birth, in heels, makeup flawless, holding her baby for the world to see. 3 times. Calm, open, transparent, not for attention, but tradition. Meghan did the opposite. Her pregnancy became a moving mystery. One day, the bump was large, round, heavy. She cradled it constantly, lowered herself carefully, walked like she was carrying something fragile. Then suddenly, days days later, sometimes the same week, the bump appeared smaller, flatter, positioned differently. And before anyone rushes in with excuses about angles or clothing, let's be honest. People aren't stupid. Royal watchers have studied these pregnancies for decades. The cameras don't lie that easily. And the movement made it worse. One moment she moved slowly, guarded. The next, she's climbing stairs, bending, twisting, moving freely like nothing is there at all. Pregnancy doesn't change like that overnight. But these weren't subtle differences, these were drastic, sometimes within hours. One moment she looked barely able to move. The next she looked athletic in heels. Screenshots spread like wildfire. Side-by-side comparisons flooded the internet. This wasn't one bad photo, it was a repeating pattern, pregnant when the cameras were perfect, suddenly agile when they weren't.
From where I sit, because clearly she was trying to put huge pressure on my bosses to take action against me.
Why else are you being sort of suspicious and secretive around labor and birth? And people theorized and claimed that the couple needed time to stage a story because Meghan didn't actually deliver the children.
And once people really started looking, the comparisons became impossible to ignore. Forums exploded. Comment sections filled with the same question over and over. How does a bump behave like this? And that thought no one wanted to say out loud started forming. The one that made everyone deeply uncomfortable. Then came the alleged documents Piers mentioned. And this is where doubt turned into disbelief. Claims surfaced that internal scheduling notes existed. Notes tracking appointments, movements, engagements, and if even half of them were accurate, they didn't just poke holes in the story. They tore it apart. Hospital appointments allegedly logged on days she was photographed elsewhere. Entire days where paperwork placed her in one location and cameras placed her in another. You can't be in two places at once. Pregnancy timelines don't bend. And then the whispers got louder. Surrogacy. Questions about Archie. Questions about Lilibet. Even darker questions people never wanted to ask.
Ironic that you should be entitled not to believe somebody if you don't want to.
If you could speak to Meghan Markle today, what would be the tenor, the tone of that conversation, and what would...
And once that door opens, it doesn't close quietly. The home birth story only fueled the fire. Meghan had carefully planted the idea. Natural, private. Frogmore Cottage, rejecting royal tradition. It fit her image perfectly, the public accepted it instantly. Then May 6th arrived, and suddenly she gave birth at Portland Hospital. No explanation, no clarification, not even a sentence acknowledging the story had changed. And remember, the first statement was wrong, it had to be corrected. Conflicting stories again, silence again. When you build a narrative that publicly, you can't expect people to forget when it collapses overnight. But that's exactly what happened. Just silence. And silence makes people dig. The more Meghan spoke publicly afterward, the worse it got. Podcasts, interviews, carefully framed vulnerability.
Markle used a surrogate. That's been something posited literally for well over 3 years when it comes to her firstborn son Archie and even her daughter Lilibet. And many people even wonder, are their children even real?
Did Buckingham Palace or Prince William set a trap for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and were they gullible enough to fall into it?
This is absolutely insane that they thought they could get away with it, especially Meghan Markle and Harry. The con of the century, two cons of the century in the form of two royal children included in the lineup.
The pregnancy stories kept coming back into focus. Every new appearance reignited old questions, and people started rewatching everything with fresh eyes. Then leaked memos surfaced. According to documents no one has successfully denied, palace staff weren't ignoring her. They were bending over backward, rearranging schedules, canceling commitments, handling last-minute demands, working double shifts. This wasn't abandonment, this was indulgence. And yet the public story became isolation and neglect. Doors weren't slammed shut, invitations were declined, meetings skipped. Then those absences were later framed as exclusion. That's not victimhood, that's manipulation. And when Piers hammered that point, public perception shifted. It wasn't oppression, it was accommodation twisted into grievance. And after all that effort, the story told to the world was mistreatment, abandonment, suffering. And again, no denials, no corrections, just silence. Then came the Oprah interview. Once untouchable, now dissected frame by frame. The pauses, the tears that never quite fell, the emotional beats that felt rehearsed. Piers Piers lined it up next to other interviews. Same cadence, same pacing, same dramatic release. And once people saw it, they couldn't unsee it. Vulnerability stopped feeling spontaneous. It started feeling practiced, polished, delivered, and that's dangerous because once people see technique instead of emotion, trust collapses. Piers' most explosive claim was this: motherhood became a shield, a narrative force field. Questioning inconsistencies suddenly looked cruel. Asking for clarity became an attack. And culturally, that works. Society is trained to protect pregnant women. And Piers argued that instinct was being used deliberately. Whenever scrutiny increased, the focus shifted back to emotional struggle. Conversation over. But silence doesn't protect forever, especially when claims are backed by alleged evidence. And Harry's silence was deafening. A man who built his image on defending his wife said nothing. No denials, no outrage, no legal threats, nothing. And silence like that doesn't look dignified. It looks like avoidance. It looks like someone afraid of opening doors they can't close. Once doubt takes hold, it sticks. And that's the real damage here. Not one accusation, not one rumor, but the slow collapse of credibility. Every future claim examined harder. Every emotional appeal met with skepticism instead of sympathy. And that's exactly what Piers set out to do. He didn't need to prove everything. He just needed to ask enough questions that belief would never fully return. And that's what happened. Mission accomplished. And here's the part people don't talk about enough. The part that lingers long after the clips stop rolling and the outrage cools down. Once doubt enters the room, it doesn't need proof to survive. It feeds on silence. And silence is exactly what followed. No firm denials, no clear timelines, no simple explanations that could have shut everything down in one afternoon. Just carefully curated absences, carefully chosen words. And the longer it dragged on, the more people stopped asking if something was off and started asking how much of the story was manufactured from the start. Because when public trust breaks, it doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes quietly, relentlessly. Every interview afterward felt different. Every emotional appeal landed softer. People weren't leaning in anymore. They were leaning back, watching for tells, listening for contradictions, replaying old footage with new suspicion. And once an audience shifts from empathy to analysis, the magic is gone. Forever. What made this even more damaging was the contrast. William and Catherine never needed to explain themselves. They showed up. They stood there. They shared the moment. Open, transparent, no mystery, no confusion, no rewritten timelines. Meghan and Harry chose secrecy, then seemed shocked when secrecy bred suspicion. You can't demand absolute privacy while also demanding absolute belief. Those two things don't coexist. And the public eventually realized they were being asked to accept a story that kept changing while being scolded for noticing. And let's be honest, this wasn't just about pregnancy rumors anymore. This was about credibility as a whole. Once people believed they might have been misled about something this personal, this central, this sacred, everything else came under review. Mental health claims, palace treatment, media narratives, even motives. It all blurred together into one question that wouldn't go away. If they weren't honest here, where else did the truth bend? And that's when the backlash stopped being loud and became permanent. The outrage faded, but the skepticism stayed. Meghan could speak, cry, explain, accuse, but a portion of the audience was no longer listening to understand. They were listening to verify, to cross-check, to compare. That's the point of no return. Because once an audience believes they've been emotionally manipulated, sympathy turns into resistance. Piers Morgan understood that. He didn't need to win a lawsuit or expose one final document. All he had to do was disrupt belief. And belief, once cracked, never seals the same way again. Even supporters began saying it quietly. I want to believe her, but is lethal. It's the end of blind loyalty. It's the beginning of permanent doubt. Harry's role in all of this only deepened the unease. The man who claimed to be the ultimate protector stood down when it mattered most. No roaring defense, no moral outrage, just distance. And distance reads as calculation, or fear, or both. If the accusations were completely false, this would have been the moment to shut them down decisively. Instead, silence stretched on until people filled it themselves. And people always fill silence with the worst possible conclusions. Now, every time Meghan appears, the audience isn't seeing vulnerability first, they're seeing strategy. They're watching cadence, pauses, phrasing, they're remembering past contradictions. And And no amount of polished storytelling can erase that. Because the moment people feel they were sold a narrative instead of given the truth, trust doesn't just fade, it curdles. This wasn't a scandal that exploded. It was one that seeped, slowly, quietly, until it stained everything. And that's the part Meghan may never escape. Not the rumors themselves, but the permanent shift in how she's perceived. The benefit of the doubt is gone. And once it's gone, no interview, no podcast, no carefully crafted confession can bring it back. That's the real ending here. Not a courtroom verdict, not a headline, but a fundamental change in the relationship between storyteller and audience. The spell broke, and once an audience wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep. That's what Piers Morgan unleashed. Not answers, questions. And questions, once planted this deeply, never stop growing.